to CommuniTEA, where young Black, gay, and bisexual men have unfiltered, candid conversations and spill it all on sex, relationships, race, identity, and community empowerment. We are here on behalf of United Black Element. UBE exists to enable young, Black, same gender-loving men to fulfill their greatest potential for good. UBE is creating ways for young men to come together, meet, socialize, and learn to support one another. If you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in need of free HIV and syphilis testing or in need of PrEP, please call 214-393-3700. So for this evening, we have a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we will be talking about interracial relationships. Yeah, good topic, right?
So relationships like this, not like this.
Not like this. Not like this. So question for you. So the question of the day is, have you or are you open to having that interracial relationship?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us why or why not down in the comments. And while you're at it, like this video, love this video, and most of all, share this video.
Sharing is caring.
So, to the panel, my lovely co-host. Just want to know, starting with you, Devin, have you or would you be open to an interracial relationship? Why or why not?
What race we talking about? You are the product. So,
Standard issue.
I like Black men. Prefer some melanin. And I don't really see myself swaying from that anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, like, okay, so melanin. I think we're not the only people with melanin in our skin. So, and then also too, when we talk about it, are we talking like a black and white thing, or are we talking about like opening it up? Because like sometimes I feel like when it comes with black and white, I look at it more as a political thing versus an actual skin color thing. And if you're not Black, you're white, and most other people fall into the white category. And so for me, I would definitely be open. I have been in interracial relationships. I took a long hiatus from them because I had to do some mental, some spiritual and emotional work, and I'm ready to kind of get back out there in that realm if it ever presents itself per se in that way. So yeah.
I like them all. I just like men. Men, and more men.
It's the men.
With a Z.
And then like I guess growing up military and living all over the world, like it's just people just become people. So now I will say there are certain situations where I do find a certain chemistry better with a certain race. But yeah, I like them all.
Nice.
32 flavors.
Great, cherry.
Yummy, no, not your ordinary.
For me, I'm open to it. I have been in interracial relationships. I'm like United Nations. It doesn't matter the race.
United Nations.
Yeah.
Right. Where your flag?
Okay.
After Courtney Phoenix, you're long flag.
So that's, I just don't like to put myself in the box. Other than the bottom box.
Yeah, but I stay right on the box then.
Oh wow, I love it. 3 episodes later.
Well, as for me, it's like, yes, even though my body language isn't giving it, it's like, yes, I'm open to it. But what I've noticed just listening to all of y'all is that the older I get, the less appealing it becomes. Like when I was a teenager and a very young adult, most of the questions that I had were on guys. Like when I look back, they were guys who were Asian, they were guys who were white, and I can hardly think of any that were Black. But lately, I say like within the past 5 years, it's almost been nothing but Black guys. I'm open to, a lot. But yes, the older I get.
So
thing for Indian girls. I just had a thing for long,
Beautiful,
black, long,
skin.
straight hair, and like this reddish brown. I just had a thing for it. But I've always liked black men, absolutely. Preferably, I think maybe what you meant by melon was the darker the better, maybe, Devin?
I mean, you just have to have some color to you.
Okay.
You have Middle Eastern kind of people. You have
Right, yeah, a whole bunch of.
They have different. So sometimes that's why we like the melanin thing that can be lost in translation.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of times lately we've only been talking about melanin only applies to us black. So I'm like,
Yeah, but so to finish what I was saying, so I have never been in a relationship, but I have talked to, I guess, a white guy before. He was an older white man. When I guess first came out on the scene, I thought I was gonna be a kept woman, but it didn't work out that way, and it's fine because now I have this beautiful black man that I would bald bearded, all of that.
Ebony guy.
Don't shut the what Beyonce say? Don't shoot the nose off my pharaoh. That whole thing going. Yes. So I would date anything, but I'm happy. Love it with what I got now, and I wouldn't want to straight on it. Come on, chocolate drop.
So Chris, last one.
We know it.
all we need is to be.
That's
I'm not racist. Black Panther Party. Black, blackity, black, or black presenting. And we're gonna leave it right there.
Presenting.
Oh, so wait. So,
So people of Latinx descent that I identify as being black.
Oh, see, I don't.
So specifically Cubanos, Dominicanos.
so like Caribbean.
Yeah,
Yo, I'm from Hispanic more so because.
but when I say black presented, I mean like culturally black.
Right. But to Chris's point, we have that second question.
Yeah,
So
right.
everyone on the panel except Chris, you said that you wouldn't. Why not? That follow up. And Devin.
Yeah,
So for me, I know what I'm attracted to. I know what I like. I know what someone needs to have in order to be able to handle me. And so for me, I want somebody who can identify with me culturally, one. Because I feel like when it comes to dating outside of your race, it's hard to, it's certain things that those people outside your race won't get, right? And so I don't want to also have to limit myself to like my conversation or how I talk. Cause like even like I'm not racist or anything, but like I feel like look at that white boy over there. So like I feel like if I was outside of that, I would have to change like who I am or some of the things that I say.
That person.
And so, but for me, I just don't see myself doing it. And then there's a whole like the physical attributes of a black man. Is something that cannot be discounted. It cannot be overlooked, misunderstood, passed over, identified with as, or replaced.
Most definitely
Can't be replaced. So I'm for it. Black excellence.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on him, something that was for me was that I couldn't imagine laying in bed and turning on the TV and see that a black guy's been shot and a white man next to me is like, I don't see the big deal. Okay, you need to get out before I kill you. Or when the riot is happening, I don't need you opening your mouth on anything unless you agree with the riot. Like, don't say shit.
Go ahead, Lava.
And you'll probably get further into this, so I don't want to jump the conversation too far forward, but like what I was saying earlier, like with different races play like a different role, like intimately with me. So like as far as like love, usually my love interests are always black. But when it comes to like sex is kind of like fair game for me. So I think also when it comes to like interracial context of like interaction with one another, are we just talking sexually or like, are we talking relationship or is it just
It's everything for me.
It's
just
right.
mine's consistent throughout.
Because it's no variations, tens.
There was one thing that you said, Chris, that about culturally they may not understand, but I've dated someone that was from Trinidad, and I didn't understand their culture. Being from Brooklyn, Oklahoma, like being exposed to the things that he grew up with like the curry and things like that. I never ever had that until I got with this man. So even though we were the same race or the same color, we would, if in society people would look at us the same, like black men, I had to learn his culture because I had never been exposed to that.
Because culture has a big.
And see, so for me, so I'm Afro-Caribbean. Okay, so like my dad is Haitian American and my mom was just black. So for me, like that, those cultures, those Caribbean cultures, I identify with because that's authentic to me, right? And so like, there's also some people within those cultures that I went there just because like culturally we're too different, too dissimilar. But like I need somebody who can see me for me, who understands me, who likes the food that I like to eat, like who can cook the same way that I can, you know, because for me it's all about an experience. I talk about this all the time. My short living in these 25 years, the experiences that I have or that I want to have in a relationship, I feel like are more effective and a better fuel when they're with black people, because I'm not racist or anything. I have friends of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, and like how I intertwine and act with them is how I look at it as in for friendships. But when it comes to like dating and me physically being with somebody and also me being intimate with somebody, I can't see myself crossing that barrier with anything other than a black person.
So you spoke about, I guess, culturally, and it's crazy because I feel like that I would much rather talk to a white Southern guy than a black guy from New York. Only because
you understand.
You understand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I agree, because in a sense of, even though you may not have been in my exact shoes, you have an inkling of knowing what the culture is and what the culture atmosphere that, so they'll be able, if you are interested in me as a black male, you know, then you're more likely to, not necessarily cater, but you'll be more likely to kind of like come in a different,
you know how to handle me, because New York men, for example, or a guy from the Bronx may talk to me real rough, and I'm a little sensitive. I don't need that. I need someone who, right? But still, I don't know. But it's just, I just feel like that a white Southern man we may connect more than a black guy from the Bronx,
Right.
or from Trinidad.
Right. And Sam, did you have something? Because I saw you.
Oh, I am thinking things. I get the point when it comes to regions, right? Communication styles based off of where you're from. That's the reason why Southerners think that Northerners are rude. It's just because the communication style is different. But when I...
No, let me tell y'all. So with the Northerners, given how expensive it is to stay up north, and given like how the mode of transit is, so like when we go up north, and so we so focused on seeing everything new, everything big buildings and bright lights. So we trying to sightsee while the next bitch is trying to go to work, and so bitch you in my way, and I'm running late, bitch move.
They're really just regular communication.
But
I wasn't done making my point. So coming from a person who's lived in New York City, something that I realize is that you just have to know what you want and ask for it. There's so many people that live there that aren't from there. They want to help because that used to be them. But when it comes to the idea of, oh, well, you know, I'll date a white man from the South and I feel like he would understand more when it comes to the culture than a black guy from the North, I'm like, yeah, he'll understand the culture from being a white man in the South, and he'll know what role that he probably plays.
Come on.
So when I listen to that, I'm like, whoa, he's on the very opposite end of the same culture, and depending on what he was taught growing up, like what part of that is he gonna fade into?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's good stuff.
That was
real good.
I mean, it's almost a catch-22. That's why I wore black and white, because it's kind of...
Everything we see is in black and white, right? That was a good conversation, but I have another question for the panel. So, for the people who have been in an interracial relationship, how did you feel in that with society? As society looked at you, how did you feel? Did you feel like that the person you were with could relate to the things that you were going through? I mean, right now in the social climate that we're in, there's a lot of things that's happening. So how did you feel being in that relationship for those that have been in those type of relationships?
Hey, everybody. I can honestly say, like, when it comes down to, like, with somebody understanding, like, what you go through, I've been surprised. I've met some Caucasian folks who are down for the cause. Like, they will go to a riot, they know the ins and outs of oppression, privilege, a lot of that. And if they don't know something, they can be educated. I've also dated black men who are very all lives matter. And so I think it's more about, at a certain point, you stop really thinking about like what other people might think of the relationship from the outside, and it's like, what is our dynamic? Because to other people, because we're both black guys, you know, we're the ideal couple because, you know, a black man belongs with a black man or something like that. But behind closed doors, you know, a riot's on TV and you're saying stuff like, well, black people don't need to be doing that because that's why we can't get ahead and stuff like that. And it's just like a lot of, you know, self-hating stuff coming from that. So I believe that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter like what a person's skin tone like is as it relates to relatability and understanding, because you could have like anomalies and people who really throw things off.
See, and that's why I like black men, because even if I'm talking to a black guy and he has that perspective, he has the knowledge and the understanding for us to have a conversation, so I can see where he's coming from. Versus someone outside of my race who views that way, you don't have the experience to talk to me about something that you feel like I'm going through or something that you see I'm going through. Don't talk to me about that. Granted, thank you for supporting me, but you will never, and you can't never. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, we all have feelings, we all have emotions, so just because they can't possibly relate because of who they are doesn't mean that they can't relate.
To the emotion, like for me personally, like when it comes to that, we all know how it feels to be hurt. Yes, there's different levels of hurt and different extremes of it. However, hurt is hurt. We have all felt it in some way, shape, or form. So like for me, like that goes into the thing of sympathy and empathy. And sometimes you're gonna have to sympathize, sometimes you're gonna have to empathize. But empathy for me personally is just relating to them on the feeling versus the actual interaction. And sometimes you may have experienced the same interaction they have and experience the same feelings, but a lot of times it's more about feelings than it is about the interaction.
Right.
And that's me also too coming from customer service, because some people, I've never had that issue. I can't tell you, but I can hear you're frustrated. I hear that you've tried. I've done those things. I've been in that kind of position of feeling those. So you know what, girl, I feel it. Let's move on now. Let's go from there. So we wanna go ahead, y'all. I'll pick up what you said.
So, like I said before, I dated a white guy, but I was probably 19, maybe 20, and he had to have been in his 40s. And so, I'm sorry, he kind of looked like Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. He was bald on top of that. It was just something about him. I'm like, this is gonna be my man. But when we were around people, I kind of had a sense like, what do people think? Because not only am I young and he's older, but I'm black, he's white, and I'm like, I just was not, informed on all the things now, and so now I look back sometimes and I'm like, what was going on? Like, did he say anything or did he do anything that maybe was offensive and I just didn't notice it? Because I was so much younger and I didn't know anything about it.
And I'm gonna be done. One thing I've noticed too, I try to avoid and I know what happens. We're younger. We're at that stage where we're kind of like, we do slightly, try to, impress people when you go out to a function and stuff like that. However, I believe like when you start getting in the mindset of what another person thinks about who you should and shouldn't be dating, you put yourself back in the category of when straight people get mad at you for dating a guy. So it's like you re-put yourself back in an oppressive situation. Yes. So it's like okay, people don't want me to be gay, but then now I'm with my gay folks and I'm with somebody that's not black, and then it's like, oh dang, so now they're gonna, So I try to, I know it happens, but I try my best to stay away from that as much as possible.
Bro, I get that. But I will say this. Before I talk about the interracial relationship that I was in, one thing that kind of almost threw me away from actually going that direction, college. So I was in college and we were at McDonald's. It was doing finals week, and two of my friends back home, they went to college with me as well, and they were in a interracial relationship. They're still married to this day, by the way. But an older white or Caucasian guy came into McDonald's and he said, "Your parents ought to be ashamed of you sitting with these people." And so we all just, my friend said, "I'm gonna pray for you." And we all were like, "Oh my God, what is going on right here?" But again, I grew up in southeastern Oklahoma, and so going to that, I kind of waited a while. Let me just say this: I lost my virginity to a white guy. So I lost my virginity to a Caucasian guy. But when I did finally get into a relationship with a Caucasian guy, it was probably the best thing ever for me. I just felt like, to y'all's point, we were just two totally different people. Even though I did like him, and I still like him like that, but it just, I know.
Wait, so you still have a thing for him, you said?
For him specifically.
Yeah, for him specifically. But the reason why we ended, I know, right? The reason why we ended was insecurities on his part. So it was the insecure part. Like, everything was good until it got to that point.
Well, speaking on it, because I've been in interracial relationship and dating relationships with men, and for me, my longest relationship was with a white guy. Actually, it was 3 years, and
you had good, didn't you?
Huh?
You had good.
Wow.
He had a lot of meat. So
anomalies.
No, there's no anomalies. Baby, them boys got meat. They got the meat. But no, I think. Okay, but no, speaking to something like, I forgot the point that I was going to speak on. I caught up in the meat.
You said that you were well paid and you had sleep.
Okay, so. Okay, so to me personally, the reason why I would say I was always open, I've always been open to interracial relationships. I've been in many places where it's been very multicultural, very diverse and stuff like that. So it wasn't foreign to me to want to or be open or be interested in it. One of the things I learned early on is the power dynamics in relationships, especially with dating someone that is black versus someone that is white. For me, or another race in general. For me personally, whenever I date, even now, date or have dated black men, it's always been more of a power struggle. I'm strong in my mouth. I'm strong, well, more than but I'm strong in my mental capacity. I'm strong in my verbal capacity, physical if needed too. And for me, I feel like with our struggles, with our traumas, with all of those things like that, for me personally, especially younger, I couldn't deal with it because I'm not used to dealing with people who are not there mentally. So for me, it was easier for me to feel like I would be okay in an interracial relationship because I could talk to you more than about just being trauma of being a black person, or because I didn't really grow up in just a household that was just poverty just stricken, or I didn't know, did, one of the two. And so there's a lot of things I could not personally relate to without coming off as all lives matter, or we make excuses, or we this and we that. And no, I didn't have those conversations per se of we should do better as a race to a white person, but I often would find myself kind of like that of, okay, I can see they're afforded this particular lifestyle or this particular way of life, and so it's okay, it just further supports why I felt the way that I felt in those interracial relationships. The reason why that interracial relationship ended and I got out of it was specifically because after a while, I could not. It was a thing of that person is no longer good for me, but also too their perspective in life. Because that was around the time with the Trayvon Martin and all of those things. And even now, like kind of like saying, I don't want you to agree with me. I don't have to have you agree with me. Honestly, I find it better if you don't agree with me, because I'm a person, I will talk out my feelings to openly vent them, and just for me to kind of like hear it out loud, for me to shape and see, okay, well, this is something I could fix, or this is something I really truly believe. And so like there were times where I felt, even in that moment, it was a moment where we were over at one of his family members' house, and that family member's friend was saying things that were opposite of, well, of the Trayvon Martin side of everything. And it was just, it was cringy as fuck. And I was just like, girl, I'm not trying to go in on you. I'm not trying to go in on you. And he said something that was very disrespectful, and he didn't intervene into it. And that was an issue for me, not because he agreed with him. It's like, you didn't say anything about it, of like, let's kind of get away from the topic, or why did you feel that way, or whatever. And so
that's not really fair, because did you say anything?
No, I said something, but it became a thing of me against that person, and I'm just meeting you, and then it's becoming a everyday situation of black against white, and I was just like, yeah, over it. And then when I really kind of realized, it was just like, there are a lot of times where I would bring you around my friends. I'm an open person. If I have a friend, my friend is your friend, you know, and I like doing it that way. But it was just like, when I'm around, it's easier for me to open up and be great and warm with your people, but you can't be with my people. And that's whether they were white, black, or indifferent. And after a while, I was just like, yeah, I can't deal with you, because we can't even have those conversations, especially when it comes to like race or culture-wise, to where it's like, well, you've always said you've always dated black people. What is your actual reasoning behind it? And also too, at that time, I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Albuquerque, I don't know if many people have ever been to New Mexico, but it's very white, Hispanic, and Native American. And it's 2% black in every city and statewide. And so it was just like, what is your reasoning behind it? I need you to figure out what your reasoning behind it, because these are actual real topics that are happening in our relationship.
To your point, I think before we even get into those relationships, those are the things that I want to know before I even step foot into this relationship with someone of the opposite race.
But I never had an opportunity until those times, and I think that was what the shattering thing was for me to get out of that relationship. Partially was because we're now faced with that, and I'm like, oh wow.
Oh, you're always faced with it. It's something you can check even when it's not going on. Like you can just
There's always that post check. You always got that post check to check it. So bringing up the next question, the next topic I want to talk about. Do you feel that like your family has a big influence on you dating outside your race?
Yes, I actually have a funny story about that. Y'all have heard it before. So it was kind of fresh after I had came out, and I was in my room doing teenager stuff. I guess I was like on the phone and doing homework, and there's a knock on my door, and it's my sister. And it has no context. We never talked about this before. It came out of nowhere. She said, well, you know, Sam, I don't think you should date anybody black, because you're real sensitive. You need somebody who can, you know, really be there for you. And white people, get you a white person or an Asian, because white folks, they love, and they love hard. And she left. And then like 15 minutes later, I get another knock on the door, and it's my mom. And she's like, hey Sam, you know, I think you should like date somebody that's white, or date somebody that's Asian, because like black men, they don't take care of themselves, they ain't gonna treat you right, you need to get you one of them. And I'm listening to all of this, and I'm like, but I am a black man. Like, how do you think I'm going to feel about this? But the irony of the situation is that as I got out and I started experiencing more, I started seeing the compounded trauma that I believe that we as gay black men have
within our
and
own.
Yes. So I'm like, maybe they were on to something, but I'm not going to turn my back on my people either.
Well, I was gonna say, so that's, and also like that, what your sister said is something that I hear commonly as well from a lot of black people. Or get you a white man so you won't have to go through this. And I think that idea comes from the longevity of years of black people historically going without and white people having. And so we view others, primarily white people, and we covet or want what they have because we have been without for so long. So we think that those are picture perfect relationships because they have a sense of security that we long to have, a sense of safety that we never have. But we fail to see within those relationships, like those right relationships, it's more shit happening that we just don't hear about or know about, right? So when we look at like rates of divorce, like the rates of divorce are higher within white relationships.
And that'll be all right to death.
It can be till death do us part, but also I have this family over here, and I'm having sex with my assistant. I'm providing all of these people safety. So I think a lot of times, like, people have this idea of getting with a white person because I want something different out of a sense of safety and out of a sense of being secure because over time, white people have always had that.
Right.
White people have always had it, right? So if I know in my mind, if I know that white people have always had it, and I ain't getting that from my own community, well, maybe I could get that from a white person. But they don't acknowledge the shit that can also come with that relationship as well.
Or if they meet a black person that does have something, it's how do you get it?
Exactly. Be a scammer.
And you know, Robin, you make a good point because sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Based on what I'm hearing from the co-host, become our own worst enemy. I always was told because, as you know, people always said I was the bougie one.
You are.
So as a bougie one, people always expected me to be with a white man, but maybe black is where I really want to be.
Rich is where I want to be. So whatever form, shape, color it finds itself to be.
Well, I'm already at the rich part. I just think the black part.
But you know, a prime example of what we are talking about is very analogous to a situation on TV that most of us are watching called Lovecraft Country. To where what's the name of the sister? Ruby. So there's a lady on this show named Ruby, and she is at the beginning of the series she's like that new age black woman singing. She sings, she's sexy. She's also a picker woman, which I love. She sings, she's sexy, dark and beautiful, right? So really black as fuck, right? So throughout the series, she meets a white woman. But when she met the white woman had an ability to turn into a man. And so they develop a relationship. And so the white woman is actually a magician. So the white woman gives Ruby a potion that she could use to change her look to conform to what Ruby thought the world wanted her to be. And so, right. So I think that a lot of times, like, my biggest fear in getting into a situation like that is that because I'm so black, I'm very black, me getting with somebody outside of my cultural, racial, and ethnic background, they will want me to conform to be somebody that I'm not.
Well, even in that show,
let me finish. And even within the show, when they covered Emmett Till's murder, and how Ruby was so upset about it, and Ruby was expecting Christina, who was the white woman, to understand what she was going through and why people were revolting. Christina never did until she decided to go and re-implement the things that happened to Emmett Till. So she paid some white people to beat her up
the same exact
way that Emmett Till did, for her to finally evoke and get that feeling that Ruby felt, and it was never clear on if she really got it or not.
She never did. The problem with that, though, for me, is that she, at least taking that, I feel like Christina, the type of character that she was the white woman, the most privileged being in America. And so I feel like even with her, she was trying to get Ruby to understand that for her, even though she understands the black and white, I feel like the thing that I like about their relationship was that she was trying to get Ruby to understand that it's not a black and white thing. A lot of the stuff also too is about what you personally want, and stop using it as a race thing. And sometimes like for me in that particular scene or that particular episode, it was just like, she's like, I can't relate, and I'm not going to relate. I don't care to relate. And sometimes
I don't care.
Which I think she's still.
I don't care to relate, but I want to conform you to be who I want you to be.
But she didn't do that. She didn't do that. And Christina did not do that to her.
But so the thing is that you, like what you said, you got to know who you're talking to, because every white person or every race or whatever is not like that. Not everyone is trying to make you conform to what they see or whatever. Like,
And I will say this before I get to the next question, just to talk about what you two were talking about. If someone has to change you, then that's not the person for you.
Yeah.
Right.
If someone has to change you, then
Because
that's not the
black
person
people can
for
do
you.
that as well.
Right.
They
It
can
doesn't matter the race. This is not. But thank you for that shout out to Lovecraft Country. And again, I haven't seen it, so thank you for the spoiler alert. But the last question that I have for the night before we get to our time is, one thing that we see, and we see this with people who become successful. So successful black men, sometimes we have seen where when they become successful, they get with Caucasian men. For instance, we have RuPaul, who's with a white man. Yeah, we had Karamo, who was engaged to a man of I guess he was Caucasian. I don't know. He was exotic. But you get what I'm saying? We see it all the time. So what do you feel about that? Do you have a certain...
I think it's survival mode. I think people get into survival mode once you get to a certain level and you're like, I cannot expose myself to, I guess, collateral damage. I guess maybe that's what they're thinking.
But then that would be the same way why he was saying somebody would get into with a white person being black from.
But too, I would say this, we're all damage goods. We all come into something with some kind of baggage.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say I have baggage, but nowhere on this body is a piece of damage. Because me and baggage included, it's a part of me, and it's valuable because it's an experience that I can learn and live from. So never view yourself as being damaged.
I don't think that's not what you were
Well,
saying.
not like that. But
I got you. But y'all know
I have two hypotheses about this.
Okay.
One is one that I've heard that I want to propose, and the other one is one that I just thought about. So, like the first one, particularly when it comes to like black straight football players, how they'll end up with a white woman. The thought is that she's a trophy. That's something that he never could have had in life without the level of status that he has now. So he's gonna go after what he thinks is better than anything he could ever have because he couldn't have it. And I mean, we're black men too, even though we're gay, so I can see how that could cross over that line and apply to us. But then the other end, like the other thing I thought about is, what if it's a cultural thing? Like, we talked about how historically white people have more privilege and they're used to having that privilege and security. So with you as a black person newly coming into all of that, would you rather figure that out with somebody else that's black, per se? Like, let's say that they don't know anything about it like you don't know anything about it. Or would you rather be with someone who you see, like, who you think understands it and is used to being on that level?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's a great point, but it's also, and not to like minimize people who haven't seen it, but it's like, that's pretty obvious. Like, if you come into something where you're like, it's a new territory, it's new money and stuff like that, like, I mean, I see it.
I don't know. For me, in that, because you mentioned something earlier in regards to saying why a black person would be interested in getting with a white person, as far as they may have money, and even kind of alluding to when we were talking about Lovecraft Country. I feel like Ruby was only interested in William or Christina because in the time that she was doing, she was like, well, I need to get fucked by a white male, or he's showing me attention, so I want to take myself away from this ease and with this hurt and whatever. But I still wouldn't understand why, like, a white person would even get with a black person once they get with money.
Wait, what?
The thing is, because even with what you just said about a sense of survival, I would see it be a sense of survival if I'm a black person and I'm interested in dating someone white because of what I think that they allege to have.
I think that's what was said.
No, it's not what was said.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying, maybe it was.
You
But
turned
what I'm asking is, out of survival, why would someone
So we need a white person to answer the
get?
question.
So
Why would you be?
why would a white person give a black person to?
Because also too, one thing is survival, because you mentioned survival as far as surviving in that new playing field of money and access. But I'm not understanding, is there still a sense of survival from the other end for someone to get with them? And do you think that it plays more into, it's a race thing because I'm getting with you? Because naturally, black people, we don't really.
So when
Outside of sex, I'm saying.
I think that, so, to your point, switching it around, so I think that white people don't see color the way that
We see it, exactly, and a lot of times I don't think that because even when I said about my last interracial relationship, a lot of the times it wasn't necessarily a scene of color, and yes, because we're on the other end of the stick, we're going to see color no matter what the issue is. But sometimes in a relationship, sometimes it's not about a color thing, it's about me needing somebody that can cater to me. Because even when you said about your mom and your sister, and then even what you said about sometimes with people being able to cater there for you, sometimes if you take away the trauma from black people, I really feel like we would advance way further. If you take because we are stuck in that trauma in being with someone that is white. That's why it's saying, well, if you like, I don't past the trauma, I see them seeing you as a person.
You know what? You got a good. Sorry.
Well, after you, then
Go ahead,
Evan
yes.
has something to add, and then Sam. So.
I just want to answer this question.
Okay.
No, you good. I just want to go back to that.
You do make a good point about a lot of it. There's so much trauma loaded in the idea of an interracial relationship that even when you say interracial relationship, they automatically think it's a white person. Like,
Exactly.
and it's so crazy. Like, first of all, I'm crazy. Y'all may be the face of interracial relationships. Y'all walking down aisles and losing virginities and stuff like that. We gonna talk about that. And I'm playing. I'm kidding.
I do it.
Okay, let's talk about it. So like even like having the Grindr app, which to me is just an app that's for men to play.
Majority Caucasian.
Exactly. But
But it can also too be regional culture.
Another black guy's on Grindr.
right, exactly. And so it's so funny how but back to Jamil's point, the trauma. There's so much trauma loaded in that we've made a public domain. We've stigmatized that as like if you're there, you only like white boys.
We say only.
And so, but it's high, but it's highlighted.
You have Jack?
I do have Jack.
Which one do you use more often, Jack or Grindr?
I use them both equally.
But earlier you made the statement, you said for a relationship you want a black man, but when you have sex you want a what?
I said in any.
I didn't say he was someone specific. He said that he was open.
He said he was
more sexually open to race than he was
outside of race.
To anything.
So when you look for people that you're more sexually open to, typically what are they? Ethnic wise, what are they? I'm asking you a question.
It's
What are they?
it's in me.
What are they?
Now you're just trying to you're right. I need you coming off that shelf.
So to answer your question about if your parents, I guess, are influential in who you date, I remember when I had went over to like a friend of the family house and she was getting ready for prom. And then my mother had found out that her date was an Asian guy. And we had got in the car and the first thing my mama said was, "Oh, I know her daddy's sick." And I was like, "Wow, what's wrong with him? Like, what happened?" And she was like, "Cause his only daughter, or his youngest daughter is dating outside the race." And it's like, well, that's not I mean, so what? It's like, if that's what she wanted. So I had just always known that my mother would rather that I date, of course, a black woman. But me bringing home a man, I could only imagine if I were to bring someone else home other than a black man. Yeah. But I don't too much care about that because obviously I'm with a man and she wanted me to be with a woman. So I'm not gonna fight love.
Sam? Yeah.
Yes, I'm gonna make it quick. So I wanted to answer the question that you had for me earlier, assuming that it wasn't rhetorical. You had flipped around my hypothesis saying, well, what if there is a poor white person that gets with a black person who has all this money? My response to that would be that even if the white person doesn't have the money, they have the infrastructure to receive it. Whereas with a black person,
To receive what?
they may the
richness.
because with a black person, they may have to build an entire container to even be able to receive all that money to even do something with it.
Right.
But who's to say that? Because even culturally, you can't, I mean, no offense, y'all, America. Quote unquote, what we refer to as white trash. A lot of the times, like, they can be in specific areas where they don't have the access to that because of money, not because of their skin color, like education or even the resources of knowing credit and doing all that. So that's where I'm starting to say, like, even in this topic of race, it's just like, it's what you assume or presume based off of what they are, because not all white people are rich, not all white people have the access to good education. Statistically, we all talk about statistics. Statistics can support stereotypes, and stereotypes we're trying to get away from.
But some stereotypes are true.
But what Sam said,
All stereotypes are some kind of true.
But what Sam said was that because you are white, though you are not rich, though you don't have this, though you don't have all of these things, being that you are white, you have the access to those things because you can take a shower and get your hair cut and everything as a white person going to
You still can
go into the interview and get the interview as opposed to a black person who is well qualified for the position and does not get the position.
Because the system is made up of white people.
Specifically because they are white, you have privilege, you have countless opportunities.
And what I'm not trying to say is that I believe that I'm less than, or that
I'm not
because
saying
I'm
that,
black, or I'm not saying that about black people in general. But what I am saying is that there is an advantage there, and it's because of that leg up. As soon as that opportunity presents itself, a person with that advantage will know what to do with it.
I'm just saying, like, if I were a white person, I would not be getting with a black person because they're getting, like, because of the, oh, well, now they got the money and I can go climb the ladder for that, because it's kind of like,
Because white people,
it's like, why would I go do that and still,
so white people, they don't do that because they don't have to think in life like that. Because of the color of their skin, right? So, because traditionally we have always had less, that's how some of us think, right? But white people, they don't even have that mindset because they've never been on the opposite end of the spectrum. So
I would say this. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but how do we know what someone's been through or what they can go through whenever we haven't walked a mile in their shoes? And I say that only because my aunt, who's my favorite aunt, and she knows what I'm talking about because I know she's going to be watching the show, she's actually married to a Caucasian man. And one thing I saw, he has a similar life to my life, other than he's straight, he's white, and he is he's everything that I'm glad that he's part of my life. But anyway, I lost my train of thought.
So you sound like that you pretty much want to live the life of a white straight man. Got it.
Yeah, got it. Really know it. But with that, I mean, in closing, Woo Child, this was a great conversation. But in closing, we have had a great conversation about interracial dating. This is. Did you have something?
I don't want the people out there to think I'm racist because I know I have real. That I have, no, it's because like I said, if we said anything today that was triggering about it, I want to let y'all know I apologize. I love all races and ethnicities of people, but when it comes to dating, I have my preferences, just like everybody has their preferences. So don't judge me based on my preferences. Just hopefully you learned something about me today. but everybody's welcome and everybody is open to receive love in whatever way you want their love to be received.
Oh, yeah.
I just really
And that was the tea. Sweet and low, so unsweet. Wait, it was the tea.
That was the tea.
That was the tea. It was a wrap.